everybody, and welcome to this episode of Told Her, the podcast. I'm your host, Devyn Penny. I am a certified self-development coach and author, and I started Told Her so that I could have conversations with women in their 20s about being in their 20s, to tell stories about my 20s and what helped me and what hurt me and how I got through everything, and so that we could do this, just hang out and have a chat. So recently in my life, I've been thinking a lot about relationships, what I want my next relationship to be like, how I'm feeling about just who I am in general. And I don't know if you know this about me, but years ago, I think like 2016, my sister and I started a podcast that we had for a little while. And on one of the episodes, I talked about this thing called the list of 100. And it is to this day the most listened to episode of that podcast. I do the list of 100 with all of my clients. And the other day when I was asking questions about what people wanted to hear on the podcast, I got so many requests for the list of 100. So that's what we're going to talk about today: relationships and just sort of what you're magnetizing towards you, what you are putting out into the world, and how to get what you actually want out of relationships. This is coming from someone who has had many relationships in their 20s and beforehand. I have had very casual relationships. I've had situationships. I've dated multiple people at the same time. I have dated people for 2 months. I've dated people for 2 years. I've had soulmate connections. I have had people that I absolutely can't stand and will not go on a second date with. I've run the gamut dating wise. And I find that with the list of 100, I can kind of constantly keep myself in check when it comes to, again, just attracting what I want and being the person that attracts that. So the list of 100 is essentially a list of 100 things you want in a partner that you write down, and you go from 1 to 100, and they don't have to be in order. It can be something as small as I want them to have blue eyes to I want them to be honest and trustworthy. It is whatever is meaningful to you in a partner. Okay, the first 30, you'll be like, okay, this is a breeze. Coming up with the next 30, you'll be like, I have no idea what I want. Then by the time that you get to like 90, you'll want to put 25 more things instead of 10. So it's a journey. It's a process. It's something you need to do on your own. It's also something that you need to kind of like get your mind right for. So I had this amazing life coach. I've talked about her before, but she was the person who taught me about the list of 100, and I've done it since. The list can change over time. So every time I exit a relationship, I write a new list, because maybe there were some things that came up that I didn't like, or maybe there were some things that came up that I didn't even think were a possibility and I loved and I want to add to the list. And it really is just something that makes it very clear what you would like in your life from a partner. So you write down all of these things. And again, they can be super broad spectrum. They can be stupid and silly things that you think other people would never be thinking about or caring about, like, brings you flowers once a week, likes to dance in the kitchen with you, like whatever, it doesn't matter, gives you foot massages. Nothing to do with anything other than exactly what you want. So being really honest with yourself about that, and also just kind of being free to feel like, oh, this might be a silly quote unquote thing, but in my ideal partner, this is what I would want. Okay, once you have your list of 100 things, you take your top 10, like the things that are absolutely things that you need in a partner. So a lot of times those are the more serious things. I always say to people, like, this is not really the time to check the box of like, he needs to be over 6 feet tall. This is when you're talking about someone who you want to be emotionally available, trustworthy, independent, secure, whatever those big picture things are. So you have 10 of them, and then you narrow them down to your top 5. These are your non-negotiables. Okay. Your non-negotiables, as soon as they are being negotiated in a relationship, need to be presented to the other person, and then either agreed upon change needs to be made, or you need to leave the relationship. That's the hardest part of your non-negotiables, is that it actually forces you and requires you to have conversations that are uncomfortable about what you need. For example, I have been with many people who would fall under the category of emotionally unavailable. Okay. I'll get into why that happens in a minute, but when that comes up in a relationship that I'm in, when I feel someone who is being unavailable to me emotionally, won't express feelings, won't have difficult conversations, whatever that means for you, then it's my responsibility to bring that up in the relationship and say something along the lines of, I'm not willing to negotiate this, fill in the blank, let's just say vulnerability with you. And in a relationship, I need someone who is willing to be vulnerable with me and is emotionally available to me and is someone who is in touch with their feelings and also can respect mine so that we can have tough conversations, not to fight and argue, but to create a safe space for us to communicate. That's taken me 7 years of practice to just master that sentence and to actually say it out loud. And I will never forget when a non-negotiable was being negotiated in a relationship of mine when I was first privy to this concept, and my life coach saying to me, you have to have this conversation. Like, this is the conversation that needs to be had. And it took me like 3 weeks to finally actually have it because I was being such a wimp about it. Like, it's scary to basically say to somebody, hey, this is what I need in a relationship. And even scarier to say, if you're not the person who can give me that, then I have to go elsewhere. And you're like, oh my God, what if they say that they can't do this? Or what if they actually don't change? Or what if they are not willing to negotiate with me? Like, there's so many things that run through your head. So anyhow, it's that kind of a conversation. And then 90% of the time, maybe 99, the person on the other end will say, of course, yeah, no, I'm willing to do that. And then it's about just actions. And oftentimes, as we know, actions speak louder than words. So you will figure out pretty quickly whether or not the person is serious about being committed to your non-negotiable. If they are not, this is maybe the hardest part, you have to leave. Like, it's your non-negotiable. I'm not willing to negotiate this in a relationship. And if this person can't fulfill this for me, then I've got to go. What we come up against a lot is what I call the 99-point guy, who is perfect except for this one glaring thing that, again, is your non-negotiable. So figuring out what those things are is the first step, and then actually being okay to bring them up in a relationship and to have the conversations about them, then being able to leave the relationship if your non-negotiable is being negotiated. The other part of doing this list is figuring out whether or not you are a desirable match for all of these traits and characteristics and qualities that you want in another person. So, for example, when I first did the list, I wanted all of these different things: someone who cared about this, someone who did this, someone blah, blah, blah. But I was not really someone who was doing any of those things to begin with. So if you want someone, for example, to be honest with you, you have to be not only honest with them, but honest with yourself. If you want someone to take good care of themselves, you must take good care of yourself. If you want someone to be emotionally available, you have to also be emotionally available. This is kind of a big thing for me, as I've been saying. If you want someone to discuss feelings, you have to do the same. If you want someone to communicate well, you have to do the same. There are a lot of things that we find desirable in other people that we are not willing to change in ourselves. And I think that it's difficult to assume that this really amazing, evolved person is going to come along and meet you where you are if it's not reciprocal. And to be clear, this is not go out and change your whole life and you're not good enough for the partner that you want. quite the opposite, actually. But I do think that it's an interesting thing to just be really honest with ourselves about what we want to attract and what we're putting out there into the world. There are many times that I have looked at my own list and thought to myself, these are the things that I need to work on. Again, emotional availability being one of them. I happen to attract emotionally unavailable people into my life because that, in all honesty, is the relationship that I know the best. I'm the most comfortable in that situation. I didn't grow up around a lot of vulnerability, a lot of emotional conversation, a lot of emotional understanding. So my EQ, even though it's high by nature, it wasn't necessarily by nurture. And sometimes it's easier for me to deal with someone who's emotionally unavailable because I know that best. It's most comfortable for me. It's not what's good for me, but it's what's most comfortable for me. So it's also an exercise in looking at the things that you are attracting into your life and really being very clear about whether or not you're attracting those things because it's what you know and it's what you're most comfortable with, or that it's something that's actually good for you. Because a lot of times, and I say this to a lot of people who deal with parents who have substance abuse issues, it being something that you grow up with, feeling so resentful of, doesn't mean that you will choose someone who is not similar to that. Because again, you've mastered that relationship. A lot of times when people talk about, like, you marry your mother, you marry your father, it's not because we're so obsessed with our parents that we want to be with them 100% of the time and recreate relationship dynamics we saw growing up. It's because that is what we know best. We have already mastered those relationships in our lives with our parents, with our guardians. And because of that, it's easiest to just be led towards someone who has a lot of those same tendencies, characteristics, traits, etc. So healing your relationship with the things that are comfortable but not necessarily good for you, and being able to seek different things out, correcting patterns of behavior, correcting yourself, falling back into old ways of thinking, or just doing what's most comfortable instead of what's best for you, is really part of what the list of 100 is all about. All that being said, I know manifestation is like the buzzword right now, and there are a lot of different things that we can do to manifest, but essentially it really is just bringing something from your head to the physical space. So getting things out on paper, rereading them, giving yourself an opportunity to just get your thoughts onto paper is, I think, super important. And it is a way to manifest. And again, I'm so cautious to even say the word manifestation now because it used to be something very different than what it is now. I get very wary of like pop culture psychology and where this is all coming from and this whitewashed spirituality. Like, it's not the most comfortable thing for me to talk about anymore because I just have found so many cracks in it, honestly. But essentially, manifestation is just, like I said, bringing something from the figurative and imaginative into reality. The good news is that if you can visualize, if you can imagine, if you can come up with all of these traits and characteristics for a partner, it means that it's attainable. We don't have access to thoughts or imagination that don't belong to us. And my list of 100 is going to look really different than your list. So it's really about the unique experience of curating not only what you want, but also who you want to be and what that looks like for you and the kinds of changes in your life that you want to make in order to be able to not only attract someone who has a lot of these qualities, but to also maintain a reciprocal partnership with them. That's the goal. I say this all the time, and I really believe it. Anyone can have a significant other. Like, I can go outside right now and I can find a boyfriend. It might not be the person that I want to actually be with, but I can do it. So figuring out your list of the things, the qualities that you want in a person is not just about having someone. It's about having the right person and being patient in that and being okay with the fact that you want your partner to meet a great version of you. And I do think that sometimes it's helpful to have another person mirroring back our growth. And I think that you can grow in relationships. But I think that the primary work that needs to be done for most of us, if not all of us, has to happen on our own first. And then we can bring another person into it. And also, your partner should be an addition to your life. They should not be someone who is detracting from any parts of you and your life and making you feel worse about your day to day. This is not someone, again, to just have. This is someone to be with and to be a partner to. And I think that it's really important to consider all of those things when creating this list. So, I have known people who have made the list and met the love of their life 5 days later. I have known people who have made the list who have met the exact person that they wrote about 10 years later. It's not about timelines. It's not about anything other than just being really clear about what you want and not worrying so much about the how. It's about knowing what you want and then doing the only thing that you can do, which is getting yourself to a place where you are a magnet for all of those things. And you are looking for those things in the world as you are also emitting a lot of that energy. I think that it's really important that we stay responsible for the kind of energy that we're putting out into the world. And that if it's not great, we need to recognize that and know that that probably has a lot to do with the kinds of people that we're bringing into our lives. So, yeah, try the list of 100. You can also do this with your career. You can do this with just your lifestyle in general. I think it's just a good exercise to get yourself beyond the place of, okay, I want someone who's, again, over 6 feet tall and has blue eyes and wears a backwards hat and has a good job and has a lot of money. Like, it's beyond that. We need something more than that. The substance that the list allows you to get to is the stuff that's going to make your relationship work for you or not. So figure out your list of 100, figure out your non-negotiables, and then go a step further and actually enforce the non-negotiables. And do not negotiate for things that you know are just simply what's right for you. Someone will be willing to give you the things that you want, that you need, as you are willing to give other people the things that they want and they need. And you deserve to have a love that is, again, reciprocal and that is also enjoyable. There's always this relationships are so hard, marriage is so hard trope. And I don't think that marriage and relationships come without difficult moments, but for the most part, your relationship should be happier than it is upsetting to you. It's not a necessity. It's an addition to the things that you already have in your life. So making space for something wonderful to enter your life is very important, but making it the number one priority in your life, again, just to have someone, which anyone can, is never going to feel fulfilling or as good. I think that that's all I have to say on the subject. Go and do your list of 100 and get back to me about what some of your non-negotiables are. And maybe your perfect person is writing their list of 100 right now. That shit really happens. Have a great week. I will see you next time.